Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new and interesting episode of Open Book Entrepreneurs. So, today we have Chelsea here with us, and she's
Hi.
amazing intuitive coach and also involved in a lot of different things in her coaching practice. But the best thing is that she actually introduces herself to our audience. So, Chelsea, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. My name is Chelsea Goucher, and I am an intuitive coach who works with several different modalities to help my clients reconnect to their inner knowing, to the still small voice inside, and kind of tune out some of the noise and chaos of the world. And I use, like I said, several different modalities, including an intuitive coaching paradigm that I was taught and then psychedelic facilitation, working specifically with psilocybin. And then I also incorporate yoga nidra and yoga and astrology a little bit into my practice. So, kind of working with a large toolbox that I've cultivated over my own personal growth and entrepreneurial journey. And I'm just kind of happy to share my lessons along the way with the people I work with.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, yeah, just before we actually started recording this episode, we were in the green room discussing and talking about, what sort of what is happening on a daily basis for entrepreneurs, for me personally, for Chelsea and so on. So, one of the main things that we actually covered as well was about this sort of like patterns that may be happening to entrepreneurs on a daily basis, like for example that we see some email from, I don't know, the tax office or from any other place which is not really pleasant at that moment, and then just triggers sort of negative reaction, and that affects the business going forward. So, Chelsea, how do you actually help your clients in these kind of situations?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a huge thing for entrepreneurs because this is the thing is I am not a business coach. I am an intuitive coach. And so, the people I work with don't necessarily have to be entrepreneurs at all. But I know from firsthand experience that working on yourself is kind of step one to being an entrepreneur. I don't know if anyone else can relate, but when I started on my entrepreneurial journey, I had no idea what it was going to require of me as a person. The kind of integrity I was going to have with myself, the self honesty, and like what you said, the ability to deal with situations that are completely not fun to deal with. And there's no one backing you up. You don't have a boss or coworkers or a corporate entity or an HR policy or anything else kind of helping you navigate the system. It's only you. And so I think that that's one thing that entrepreneurs often miss, especially at the beginning stages of their journey when they're just trying to launch a business. You kind of can go into it like a little bit naive, which isn't bad. That excitement and that positivity and that self-confidence is really important. But often in the beginning, you'll have some bad things happen, and then you instantly kind of are knocked off that ledge. And you're like, oh, this is too hard. Maybe I'm not ready. Maybe I'm not good enough, and it can set you back or make you feel like that you should give up on your dream, whatever it is, whatever kind of business you want to have. And so that's why I think that really getting solid with yourself is so important, because when you are able to tap into your intuition and truly feel in your body when you're in alignment, then you're unstoppable. You have to be able to get into that space with yourself, whether it's waking up and having a morning routine, meditating, drinking your coffee, not watching the news, whatever it is, and just be able to get into that space. Then when you sit down at your computer and you have bad news from a client or a message from the tax office or whatever, you're able to receive it with more of an open heart and open mind. And that's when your creativity and your intuitive knowing is going to step in and really help you deal with it and find solutions in a creative way rather than letting it drag you down.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that all sounds really good in terms of, when we were able to actually do these things and just like focus on a daily basis on our routine and building it up and everything. But then we also get affected by, negative news, as you mentioned, reading. A lot of us, we are addicted to reading the news because we have to know what is going on in the world. We have to know, what is the latest policy, what is whatever, for whatever reason. And then on top of that, it's like if we start doing certain routines as well, a lot of people, I'm struggling with this myself as well. Like we start doing certain routines, and then we don't actually commit long term to those routines, because life happens. You have to wake up earlier because of family, whatever, and then eventually you fall out of the routine, and then that's the moment when it hits you. So
Yes.
how do you deal with those situations then?
Yeah, it's so very true. I mean, and that's again something that the way I've really approached my own entrepreneurial journey is to really try to cultivate within myself patience and an ability to know that, they say Rome wasn't built in a day. And that's the thing is like, my advice maybe doesn't apply to everyone. There's some people out there that may have millions of dollars in capital and they're ready to throw money completely at their dream, but I know for the average entrepreneur, maybe you don't have all that capital. Maybe you are working from more of a middle class background. You're really trying to build yourself up from the ground up. And when you do that, I think it's really important to remember that when you see super successful people online or you listen to a super successful podcaster, they've been working at it for years. And they've by now gotten to a point where they do have the capital, they do have the money. And so to really remind yourself, like, what is it like to start at the beginning? Because it can be so easy to want to have it all right now. And I think that when you're building a business, you have to really ask yourself, if I earned 5 million, $10 million this year, would I be able to spend it effectively? Would I have the capacity within myself as an individual to spend it wisely? Would I be able to balance my new wealth with my relationships, with my friends, with my family, with, relatives that are coming out of the woodwork asking you to borrow money? So there's all these things that again, we might want the instant success, but at the end of the day, the hard work itself is actually what's going to make us become the kind of people that can handle the success. And so I think it's really important to every time, you get knocked off a routine or something comes up and like, a family obligation gets in the way or you get distracted and you're not focused to just to realize that that is within you, maybe a little bit of avoidance or a little bit of non-commitment to yourself and to your own dream. And so it's an opportunity to sit back and kind of connect to that intuition and ask yourself, is this really what I want? Is this dream really what I want to pursue? And if the answer is yes, then it's just a reminder to say, okay, well, I need to maybe talk to my family again about what I'm doing and see if they can respect my boundaries better. Or, if you're getting distracted by being on your phone or watching the news, just making a commitment to yourself, like recognizing like, okay, this is kind of an addiction I have, and I need to treat it that way and address it the same way I would if it was alcohol or something else. So really just letting all of the things that throw you off be pointers back to yourself and how you can level up and step even further into the role of entrepreneur that you want to embody.
Wonderful. And how can intuitive coach actually help with that?
Absolutely. I think that the work that I do is very helpful because I think a lot of people maybe at the very beginning of their entrepreneurial journey, they recognize a desire they have. Maybe they've received help from someone, a personal trainer or a holistic health coach or something, and they're like, "Oh, that person really impacted me. I would like to do something similar." Or they listen to a great podcast and they're like, "Oh, that person is having an impact. They're spreading their message. They're getting ideas out there that other people aren't talking about. I want to be part of that." And so you have this inspiration and you want to go after it and build your business. But often you still are completely, I mean, you don't just have an idea to build a business and then wake up and you're Henry Ford, so you have a whole mindset that you really need to, unless you were born with completely emotionally developed and mature parents and a perfect family and you've never experienced any trauma, most of us have certain default programming in our minds, and it comes from how we were raised, maybe from experiences we had at school and just from society in general. There's a lot of messages that we receive from society about how we're supposed to be, how we're supposed to act. I mean, as a woman, it's like always confusing getting message from both sides of the spectrum. And then, you know, I know that for me, growing up in a very middle class family, often the message you received about money was, oh, yeah, like, of course we want money. Of course we want to be rich, but also that, like, people that have money and that are rich, like, maybe they're, nefarious. Maybe they did something dishonest to get there. Maybe they stepped on other people. Maybe, so there's a lot of hesitancy that people have about money, about success, about what it means to be an entrepreneur. There's imposter syndrome, the thought of like, oh, well, who am I to help anyone else? Who am I to help guide someone back to their intuition? And so, in the beginning of the journey, especially as an entrepreneur, you really need to dive into those mindsets because those will 100% hold you back. If you don't have a good relationship with money, it will hold you back. If you don't have a good relationship with your own self image and your own self perception, it will hold you back. And so that's why I think intuitive coaching is really foundational because I think that, there's like the classic book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And that's basically what it goes into is the reason why, you know, the wealthy create more wealth and why their children are often entrepreneurs that create, clothing lines and music and whatever is because they've never been taught that they couldn't do that. They've never been shown anything different. They've had that self-belief the entire time. Whereas often people that come from a more humble background often, have it beaten into their heads other things. I mean, I grew up being taught, get good grades so you can go to a good college, so you can get a good job, so you can have a good retirement. And that's how life goes. And, my journey started when I really started to hone my intuition and hear myself and realize that that's not what I wanted. That's not what I wanted for my life. I wanted to be able to travel. I wanted freedom. I wanted to be able to leave a legacy and to have an actual impact on the world, not just be a cog in the wheel at some corporate job. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it wasn't for me. And I started on my entrepreneurial journey and learned right away that the first thing I needed to address was what was in my own head.
Totally. And how do you actually connect to your intuition?
Well, there's lots of different ways to connect to your intuition. Two of the modalities I work with, the intuitive coaching and then also yoga nidra, they're both different forms of guided meditation that can help you get into. So we all have, different brainwave patterns, and certain guided meditations can help you get into brainwave patterns where it is more of your brain is working more as a whole rather than it just being like your prefrontal cortex and that kind of logical computer processing function that we often have going like all the time, even at 2 a.m. It kind of can help turn that off. So, what science has started to reveal is that your brain has a series of neural pathways called the default mode network. And the default mode network is kind of what they're thinking is responsible for our ego construct. So it's the thing that connects our sense perception to our memory. And so that feedback system between intake and memory helps us create a storyline about ourselves in our own head. And this is the story of us. It's who we are. It's the part of me that says, I'm Chelsea, and this is my story. This is what it was like growing up. And so it creates this narrative that we all have for ourselves. And this narrative sometimes can be very unhelpful. It's like when you hear someone talking about how someone is always like in a victim mindset, it's not because I mean, everyone's been a victim of something at some point in their lives. And some people have experienced much more terrible victimization than others, and that's not to take that away from them at all. But there is some truth in acknowledging that that story, if they're constantly reinforcing the idea I'm a victim, that starts to affect their perception of themselves. So things like the default mode network, they kind of need to be turned off or like tuned out a little bit to connect to the intuition, because we have this like monkey brain kind of constantly going, trying to keep us safe, keep us, protected from outside dangers, whatever they may be. And, we can be in fight or flight all the time because, in our society, we haven't evolved as quickly as our brains in so many ways. And so things that really aren't life or death can make us feel life or death. We have someone say something negative about us on social media, or, a relative gets upset with us, or whatever, and it can make us feel, instantly like our brain just starts going, oh, I must have said the wrong thing. Is it me? Is it them? Like, and it's just all not helpful. And the more you're in your head there, the less connected you are with your heart, with your intuition, and with the way your brain is meant to work on like a holistic level. And so yoga nidra, the intuitive guided meditation, they can all help get your brain into a state where it's working together to turn off the noise and allow you to kind of just sit in the stillness of pure awareness and allow thoughts to flow through you, and start to realize that when you let thoughts flow through you, it's a completely different story than what this ego mechanism is kind of repeating to you over and over again. And that's why my work with psychedelics is really impactful as well for clients, is because what they've shown with science, specifically with psychedelics, is that default mode network is related to things like anxiety, depression, addiction, that really in many ways are reinforcing stories. And so psychedelics work by turning off that default mode network. So I read Michael Pollan's How to Change Your Mind, and an analogy he used about psychedelics that I really liked is, it's like if the default mode network is the interstate highway system, and it's just the main highways of your brain that all the cars go on all the time, then something like psychedelics, it's like shutting down all those highways, and then your brain has to use the back roads. And so all of a sudden, there's neural connections happening that weren't happening before. And that's really where creativity can come from, where new ideas can come from, and where eventually people can start to see and define themselves in a different way than the way that old story was constantly defining themselves.
Wonderful. So thank you so much for this wisdom. And yeah, if someone wants to actually find out a little bit more about you, connect to you, or how they can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on Instagram. It's at Awakening Chandra, or my website is awakeningschandra.com. It has all of my different offerings there, the different modalities I work with, and a little bit more about me. And yeah, I would love to connect with any of your audience and anyone that's interested more in what I do.
Wonderful. Yeah, I can share this in the description of this video as well. And yeah, thank you so much for being a guest today. Thank you for sharing these wonderful tips and insights. And thank you all for watching and listening. If you like this episode, drop us a like, subscribe, comment below as well. And yeah, see you all in the next episode. All the best, and bye bye.
Yeah, thank you.